Welcome to Silicon Valley Asian Business Talk.
Hello, everyone. This is Roger Chen from University of San Francisco Center for Business Studies and Innovation, Asia Pacific. Welcome, BV Jagadeesh, and also thank you for joining our interview program. Would you please briefly introduce yourself?
Yes. First of all, Roger, thank you so much for having me as part of this. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be associated with University of San Francisco and then be part of this. I came to this country in 1982, and I actually had already finished my master's degree in India itself, and I had worked for a couple of years, and I happened to just get a job in a Silicon Valley high technology company. And since then, pretty much I have worked all my life until I started my own in 1993. I pretty much had worked in mostly startup companies. So I was sort of fortunate to work with different kinds of startup companies so that even though I was an engineer for many, many years, I got to actually see different aspects of building the product and then bringing the product to the market as well. I started my own first company end of 1993, which is Excellence Communications, where we pioneered the whole concept of internet data centers. We had version 1 of the AWS cloud that we used to offer to our customers. The company, we went public in 1998. I left the company in 2000 to start another company called NetScaler, which actually solved the problem for this hyper growth that the data centers were experiencing because of the server inefficiency. We dramatically reduced almost like 10:1 in terms of the number of servers that people used to deploy before to people deployed with the NetScaler. So that reduced tremendous data center footprint consumption, power consumption, the overall cost of running a data center for corporations. And that company, as you know, after 9/11, the entire market sort of collapsed. So we'll discuss that a little bit later. But eventually we came back and we built a flagship product, the NetScaler load balancers, which then started to do extremely well. And in 2005, Citrix came forward to acquire us. So for the last 10, 12 years or so, I've been primarily focused as an angel investor, and I'm working with the next generation of entrepreneurs, mostly in B2B and enterprise infrastructure, software, SaaS companies. About 40% of my time I spend on nonprofit organizations, both in the US as well as in India.
Discussion topic: growing from early customers to mainstream market.
Typically, after a company kind of figure out or identify the initial product market fit, as you mentioned earlier, typically the company enters the scaling up or growing stage, right? So, but of course, that scaling up is a very abstract concept. So, what's your kind of observations or views that startup company need to be aware to manage or deal with this kind of a growth phase, avoiding mistakes and lessons? Yeah.
So this is the second phase of the product market fit. Right? If you, I'm sure you know this, Jeffrey Moore's crossing of the chasm.
Yeah.
And a lot of companies, they create that first product, which is successful in the early adoption of the market. And since they don't prepare themselves, then you don't cross the chasm at all. You end up actually falling through the cliff. And I had several of my companies, right, which kind of went through challenges like this. And the right way to solve this problem is once your cash flow is happening from this early adoption, and I'll give you several examples. I'll give you an example of my own NetScaler, and I'll give you an example from Nutanix, which is one of the companies that I had seed funded, so that people actually understand what exactly that means and crossing of the chasm, right? So in case of NetScaler, our early adopters were customers who needed performance and speed of response of their applications. So a lot of our features, functionalities, marketing, positioning, right, all of these things were centered around high performance and making sure this application response time becomes faster because of all these technologies that we had. So because of that, we won all these internet-centric companies. We won Google, we won MSN, Yahoo, eBay. All of these customers were the early adoption kind of customers. Now, that market at the end of the day is going to get saturated, right? Yeah, you can do maybe $30 million, $50 million revenue per year. But beyond that, if you want to grow this to be a billion-dollar company, you have to break into the mainstream enterprise. So when you go into the mainstream enterprise, the requirements of the mainstream enterprise is lot more. In fact, they don't even care about performance. Right? It's completely contrast. So there's a ton of these functionalities because of the applications that they're running, because of the environment that they have. All these things, you need to start investing your time and resources in developing the next market that I'm going to go after. But at the same time, you don't take your eyeball off of this first product, which is your cash cow. Right. Because startup companies, you'll start with, like in our own case, we started with 0, and then year 1 we had like $2 million in revenue. Year 2 we had $10 million and 20 and 40 and 80 and all of that. So between 40 and 80 is where we started to also offer the product to the enterprises. But so after 80, almost 60 was coming from these early adoption, right? So that because we didn't take our eyeball off of the first set of customers, but at the same time, we now started to position the product for the enterprise with all the functionality that is required. So let me take an example of Nutanix. Nutanix early adoption, Nutanix is a storage company, right? And they were the innovators of this so-called concept called the hyperconvergence. Hyperconvergence is on the same server, you have compute, you have storage, and you have networking. But primarily it's a compute and the storage, right? Because in the old architecture, you used to have cluster of compute servers and you used to have cluster of storage servers. So Nutanix, through this whole Google file system, GFS concept, they built using commodity servers. You keep on adding servers, your compute power increases and your storage also increases, right? So the first application they saw as an early adoption was the virtual desktop. So a lot of corporations that use call centers in other countries like Indonesia, Vietnam, India, all these places, they use these call centers. To the call centers, they don't want to give complete access to their entire network, corporate network. So that's why you give this virtual desktop. So everything is like completely controlled. You know who is accessing. You can turn on a person, turn off a person like this. So that application took off very well because a lot of these enterprises, they were using call centers in all these different countries. And Nutanix became a beautiful product for that requirement. Now, when you want to penetrate into the rest of the enterprise, you need functionalities associated with Microsoft Outlook, Oracle database, right? Exchange server, and all kind of Salesforce, all kinds of mainstream applications that is running in your data center. You have to have solution for that. So what Nutanix did was the cash cow for them was the virtual desktop, and then they slowly started to transition into the mainstream. And Day one, if they had gone and said, hey, replace a NetApp or an EMC and then use my product, customer would have shown the door. But they solved this problem for the virtual desktop beautifully, and they built the confidence. Customer built the confidence with the company. And then when they came and said, look, I've got a solution now for Exchange Server. Customer said, okay, let's try that out. So that is how the revenues grew from $50, $100 million into multi-billion dollars for Nutanix.
Thank you for watching.